All right, let's get into a real historical mystery. We're going to talk about a battle that was so huge, so absolutely decisive, it should be right up there with names like Waterloo or Gettysburg. But for most of us, it's a total blank. This is the story of the Battle of Leipzig, what you could call history's forgotten titan.
First, just let this number sink in for a second. Roughly 560,000 soldiers. That's the number of people who were sucked into this one single battle. To give you some perspective, that's bigger than the entire population of a lot of major cities today, all crammed onto one battlefield.
And think about this. For an entire century, from 1813 all the way up to the start of World War I, nothing in Europe even came close to this scale. For 100 years, this was the undisputed heavyweight champion of land battles.
Which, of course, brings us to the big question. If this battle was so massive and had such enormous consequences, why does everyone know Waterloo as Napoleon's big finale, while Leipzig, well, it just gets kind of pushed to the side? That's the puzzle we're going to try and solve today.
So, to really get a handle on Leipzig, you've got to rewind to 1813. Napoleon Bonaparte. Well, he's on the ropes, but you can bet he is not down for the count. This whole thing was shaping up to be his ultimate showdown.
So, Napoleon had just come off this absolutely catastrophic defeat in Russia in 1812. He lost almost his entire veteran army, the Grande Armée. But, being Napoleon, he somehow conjures up another massive army out of thin air. The catch? It was mostly made up of teenagers and guys who'd barely held a musket before. He had the bodies for sure, but he didn't have the battle-hardened experience he used to.
Meanwhile, the Allies, all the countries fighting him, were so genuinely terrified of Napoleon's genius on the battlefield that they came up with this really clever strategy. It was called the Trachenberg Plan, and the idea was simple, but kind of brilliant. If you see Napoleon himself leading the army, you retreat. Don't engage him. But if it's one of his marshals in charge, you attack with everything you've got. The goal was to basically bleed his army to death by picking off his weaker commanders one by one.
And just look at who was lined up against him. I mean, it was basically the rest of Europe. You had Russia, Austria, Prussia, Sweden. All the big players were on the same team. Even the United Kingdom sent a small but very cool contingent, a rocket brigade. And on Napoleon's side, he had his French troops, plus allies from Poland, Italy, and a bunch of German states. The stage was set for something epic.
So let's get to the battle itself. And listen, this was not a quick one-day fight. This was a brutal 4-day slugfest that would end up completely shattering Napoleon's empire and lead straight to his first abdication.
So it raged from October 16th to the 19th. The first day was just a horrific bloodbath, with no one really winning. The second day was this strange, eerie pause as both armies just tried to patch up their wounds and rush in more troops. But the 18th, that was the day everything changed. Napoleon's own German allies, the Saxons and Württembergers, literally switched sides right in the middle of the fighting. It was a complete disaster, a betrayal that just crippled his lines and forced them into this chaotic, desperate retreat on the final day.
The human cost, it's just staggering. The total number of killed and wounded is estimated to be around 133,000. To put that in perspective, that single number is larger than the entire army Napoleon had at Waterloo. Just an unbelievable amount of carnage for 4 days.
And the horror didn't stop when the fighting did. With tens of thousands of bodies and wounded men all packed into one area, a massive typhus epidemic just exploded. It ripped through the city of Leipzig and killed 1 out of every 10 civilians living there. It's just a grim, grim reminder that the price of war is never just paid by the soldiers.
Okay, so we've got this colossal, terrifying battle that was a direct cause of Napoleon losing his throne. Which brings us right back to our original question. Why is this thing so overshadowed? Why is Waterloo the name everybody knows?
Well, it really seems to boil down to a few key things. First, it's a storytelling problem. Leipzig is bracketed. It's stuck right between the super famous disaster in Russia and what we all think of as the final battle at Waterloo. Second, there's a bit of a cultural bias. English language history has a huge global influence, and naturally it's going to put the spotlight on the battle where the British played the starring role. And finally, Leipzig was, well, it was just messy. It wasn't a beautiful chess match of tactics, it was a grinding, bloody, attritional slog.
There's a great analogy from World War II that really nails this. On the Eastern Front, you had Operation Bagration. It was arguably the biggest, most destructive land battle of 1944, and it completely shattered a German army group. But what do we all remember from 1944 in the West? D-Day, right? It's the simpler, more famous story, even though Bagration was technically bigger.
It's the exact same dynamic with Leipzig and Waterloo.
So what it really comes down to is this. We just love a simple story. Real history's complicated, it's messy, but the way we remember it, we like a clean beginning and definitive end. Waterloo gives us that perfect, tidy bookend to the whole Napoleon saga in a way that Leipzig, despite its insane scale, just doesn't.
But here's the thing. Just because the battle is overlooked in a lot of the world, that doesn't mean it's forgotten everywhere. Oh no. In Germany, its legacy is literally cast in stone.
Yeah, in Germany, they don't call it the Battle of Leipzig. They call it the Völkerschlacht. Now that translates to the Battle of the Nations, but it also has a much darker second meaning, the people's slaughter. And to remember it, they built something truly enormous.
This is the height of the monument to the Battle of the Nations, which stands in Leipzig today. 91 meters. That's almost 300 feet tall. It is an absolute beast of a structure, designed to make you feel the immense weight of what happened there.
And it weighs 300,000 tons. This isn't just a statue, right? It's a man-made mountain. It's a physical anchor for the memory of this battle, making sure that on the ground where it was fought, it can never, ever be forgotten.
And this brings us right back to that name. When you stand in front of this immense, almost brutalist monument, that second meaning, the people's slaughter, it feels chillingly real. It's a fitting name for one of the bloodiest chapters in European history, and a tangible reminder of its awful cost.
So we'll leave you with this question to think about. The story of Leipzig really shows how easily even the biggest, most important events can get sidelined in our collective memory. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other crucial, world-changing moments have been lost in the shadow of a simpler, maybe neater, but perhaps less truthful story?